Hey, welcome! Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful blueprint for transforming education, and we're heading to the countryside of Costa Rica to do it. We're going to look at how you can build better schools, literally from the ground up. So let's get into it.
And wow, this is really where our story kicks off. Just take a second and imagine the challenge this quote describes. One teacher, 6 different grade levels, all happening in the same room at the same time. You could just feel the weight of that, right? It puts a real human face on the huge systemic issues these rural schools are up against.
So, before we can even start talking about solutions, we've really got to get to the bottom of the problem. The research here identifies a whole series of major obstacles that are holding these schools back. So let's unpack these, one by one.
Okay, so the study really points to 4 big, interconnected challenges. You can almost think of them as the 4 wobbly legs of a table. You've got limited teacher training, a real lack of basic resources, the huge impact of just being isolated, and a system that's basically flying blind without good data.
First up is professional development. And, it's super important to be clear here. This isn't about blaming the teachers at all. It's about the system that's supposed to be supporting them. And in a lot of these rural areas, it's the way that support is being delivered that's just, well, it's not working.
And this quote, man, it just hits the nail on the head. We all know these, right? The classic sit and listen workshops where you get pulled out of class for a lecture and there's basically no follow-up. The research is pretty blunt about it. This kind of thing almost never leads to real, meaningful change in the classroom. The second big hurdle is a simple but really profound lack of stuff. I mean, we're talking about everything from up-to-date textbooks to decent internet and computers. You just can't teach 21st century skills with 20th century tools. It's as simple as that.
And this really drives home just how urgent this is. I mean, even after that huge push for digital everything during the pandemic, the core curriculum itself is often way out of date, especially in those key areas like STEAM. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Kids in these areas are at a huge risk of being left behind.
Okay, so the third obstacle is that geography itself becomes this massive barrier. When a school is really remote, it can feel like it's on an island. You've got teachers feeling totally cut off from other professionals, and the school itself is disconnected from potential partners, like universities or companies, that could bring in a ton of support and new ideas.
And the last big one? It's all about the data. Or a lack of it. When you don't have good, solid data, you're really just guessing. So you end up making huge decisions about policy based on anecdotes or what you think is happening, not on what students actually need.
And this quote just lays it all out there. I mean, if all your info is stuck in a bunch of random spreadsheets that don't talk to each other, how can you possibly see the big picture? You can't spot trends, you can't make informed decisions. Without a coherent data system, you can't have a coherent strategy for getting better.
Okay, so we've laid out the problems pretty clearly. But here's the thing, and this is what's so cool about this study. It doesn't just leave us there. It actually paints this really clear, hopeful picture of what better could look like. It maps out the journey from just barely surviving to actually thriving.
So, what does that look like in practice? Well, first up, you've got to completely overhaul professional development. The idea is to ditch those one-and-done workshops and move to continuous, hands-on support that's actually relevant to the real challenges of teaching multiple grades in one room.
All right, next up, that resource gap. And the goal here? It sounds simple, but it's a huge deal. Full access. We're talking about making sure every single student and every teacher has the technology, the internet, and the learning materials they need to be successful, no matter how remote their school is.
And then you have to tackle that isolation problem head on. So instead of these lonely islands, the schools become these connected community hubs, right? The vision is for this whole ecosystem of support, connecting them with universities, local businesses, and community groups to bring in new energy and new resources.
And last but not least, you fix that data mess. The whole idea is to stop guessing and start using actual evidence. So schools and their districts could use real data to see what's working and what's not. And then, make smart changes based on facts, not feelings.
So we have the problem, and we have the vision for something better. The big question is always, how do we get from here to there? Well, this is where the blueprint for change comes in, a set of concrete, evidence-based strategies designed to bridge that gap.
And it's really important to get this. These solutions aren't just, wishful thinking. They're grounded in some serious research, a practical mix of hard numbers from surveys and real human stories from interviews and observations. That rigorous approach is what gives these ideas so much weight.
So the whole strategy really boils down to 4 key actions that all work together.
First, you build professional learning communities, so teachers aren't working alone anymore. Then, you bring in this amazing technique called lesson study for real practical improvement. You actively push schools to build partnerships. And finally, you shift the focus in the classroom to hands-on, active learning.
So what in the world is lesson study? Well, it's this really cool, super practical process. Instead of just talking about teaching theory, a small group of teachers gets together to plan a lesson. Then, one of them teaches it while the others watch, not to judge, but to learn. Afterwards, they all get back together to talk about what worked, what didn't, and how they can make it better. It's professional development in action.
And of course, none of this can happen in a vacuum. This quote really hammers home a crucial point. Collaboration is everything. For this stuff to actually stick, you need everybody on board. The government, private companies, universities, all working together on the same team, making sure that what's being taught actually lines up with what the country and its students need for the future.
Now, it would be really easy to listen to all this and think, that's a nice story about Costa Rica. But trust me, the implications here are way, way bigger than that. This is basically a model for improving education pretty much anywhere in the world.
And this quote from the OECD, that's a major global organization, it just sums up the core lesson perfectly. It all boils down to this. The single best investment you can possibly make in education is investing in your teachers. Yeah, set high standards for sure, but then you have to give them the amazing, continuous support they need to actually meet those standards.
And that is the ultimate takeaway here. The specific challenges might look a little different in rural America or in parts of Africa or Southeast Asia, but the core principles of this framework, they're totally universal. It's all about empowering teachers, getting them the right resources, breaking down that isolation, and using real data to light the way forward.
What this whole thing proves is that with the right strategy and the right support, even the schools facing the biggest challenges can become these incredible engines of opportunity. And that kind of leaves us all with a final question, doesn't it? What amazing, untapped potential is just waiting to be unlocked by investing in the teachers and schools in your own community?